Welcome back, everybody. This is Mark Vines, and welcome to the Mark Vines Show. And this is your one-stop shop for everything that you need to know to make your conservative friends closer friends and really anger your in-laws and any liberal friends that you may still have at this point. So we are going to talk to you about the truth, make it very real to you, and articulate it in a way that will make you sound smarter. It will make you smarter and anger all of your liberal friends. And today we're going to be continuing with part 2 of a two-part series regarding the RNC and DNC conventions. And we have again with us today Frank Runles. And Frank Runles, if you do not already know or don't already subscribe, has a podcast of his own called Lies People Tell, which is also available on any podcast service that you have. And in that podcast, he talks about being able to detect lies at work, at home, with supervisors, employees, or whoever you may have in your life. So with that, Frank, welcome back.
Hey, man. How you doing?
Doing good. So, Frank, the last time we were talking with one another, we were talking about the RNC and DNC conventions and just kind of your thoughts on what was going on. And we wrapped up with, really the gaslighting that is going on with liberals. And I finished by talking about the governor up in Minnesota and how she was talking about how white supremacists and Confederate supporters and people flying Confederate flags and Nazi flags were protesting outside the Capitol. But I pointed out that, she said that, but presented zero evidence. In fact, to this day, I have never seen even one picture of a Confederate flag or a Nazi flag flying up there. And, in gaslighting, just as a reminder for our listeners that may not be familiar with that term, gaslighting is when somebody is crazy or has a problem, but they tell you that you're the crazy or you have a problem. And they do that often enough to where you start to believe that maybe you're the crazy one. But what I want our listeners to remember is, you have to look at what's going on in front of you and trust your own eyes and your own instincts and ask yourself this. These people say this, but where is the evidence? I have not seen the evidence. Just like up in Minnesota, this George Floyd murder, and that's what it was, we've been taught to believe that was a racial incident when no evidence to this day has been presented that George Floyd was murdered because of his color. It was a murder, and that's what it was, but yet we have cities burning down. But anyway, there was a lot of that presented in the differences between the RNC and the DNC conventions there. So, Frank, just continue on with your thoughts on your general takeaway thoughts on the conventions.
Well, you were talking about the governor. That was the governor of Michigan, Whitmer, and you're exactly right.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Michigan. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And it's as far as gaslighting goes, that's stock and trade with the media at this point and politicians on the left. So here's a tip for all of your listeners. If you hear a Democratic politician or the media tell you something, just assume that the chances are 98% that it's not true or only a half truth. And then you'll always be far better off. Do your own research. Don't believe everything you hear because these guys are invested in not being honest. And as far as the RNC versus DNC, I watched as I said last time, it's like watching a middle school, high school, or a middle school play versus a Broadway show. Just the quality. But what was really telling was just the type of people that the RNC brought in. And they brought in they didn't bring in celebrities. They didn't bring in many politicians. They brought in mostly people that would testify, if you will, to what they've experienced under the so-called horrible Stalinistic regime known as Donald Trump. And you walk away saying, geez, they really were excellent speakers, and they've really picked a nice, diverse group that touched on every little aspect of American life. And B, it was devastating to the narrative that was out there. it was completely devastating. And you can see that in the aftermath of what the Democrats have done to adjust their fire in how they're approaching things. Through the DNC convention, they did not mention violence and rioting one time, not one time. They didn't mention peaceful protests, or mostly peaceful protests, as they like to call them. But now suddenly they have been forced, because of the RNC and the convention, to come out and say in a tepid way that we're against rioting and that's bad. But then they pivot and say, but it's not our fault, it's Trump's fault. See, these are the type of guys that look at a rape victim and said, well, listen, if she wasn't dressing so sexy, that wouldn't have ever happened. They like to blame the victim. I mean, Trump is, the easy scapegoat. The problem is most sentient people are saying, are you kidding me? A, it's you guys have never condemned it before until now. And B, it's exclusively Democrat-ran states and cities where this is all happening. So, it has that RNC shifted the narrative and it closed the gap, and they suddenly feel like, well, geez, maybe we are vulnerable. The DNC was almost like they thought they were playing, four corners strategy to just run the clock out because they thought they had this in the bag. And Trump went in there and said, no, he took the ball away. And now they're like, oh, crap, now we're going to have to go out there and play.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Oh, and Frank, by the way, if you can get anywhere closer to a Wi-Fi, that might help a little bit, just because we're dropping you just a little bit, little pieces here and there. But I did want to say that you are absolutely correct. And what I love about your new podcast, Lies People Tell, it really helps because, folks, I think when you learn some of the techniques that Frank teaches, you will never, ever look at another speech the same again, a news broadcast or anything, because Frank, you're absolutely correct. When we talk about lies, there's two main ways that people lie. And I'm saying this as somebody that also taught interview and interrogation myself, and that those are lies through commission and omission, meaning I either overtly lie to you, meaning I tell you a lie, or I just leave things out. And what you are seeing right now, and I'm going to ask you to elaborate on this, is it's not so much that the Democrats are openly lying to you. They just aren't giving you the complete truth. And you just touched upon that, right? They think about what's the big thing. There's two main things that we have, three main things that we have going on in America today. The economy, which has gone down because of the COVID-19. So you have the economy, then you have COVID-19, and then the riots, right? Those are the big things. Now, how is it that you have a week-long convention, the Democrats, and you don't even mention this? And when people just don't address an issue, that's a sign of lying, isn't it, Frank?
Well, absolutely. It's lying by omission, and it's the easiest way and the most prevalent way that people deceive. They just don't, tell you the parts of the story that looks bad, doesn't work in their favor, doesn't carry their narrative. And that's what we're seeing in the media and the DNC. And the media is really the culprit here. The politicians are politicians. They didn't become corrupt within the last 4 years. Politicians have been bad and narrative wells for millennia. I mean, ever since we've had politicians, right? All the way back to Rome. What's the new phenomenon is how the media has completely sold their soul to try to push forth a narrative that's progressive in nature. It's anti-American, anti-Trump, and they do it without blushing. There was a time when I remember, and you remember, we're both old enough to remember, when the media actually tried to give some sense of neutrality. They're not even trying any longer. They don't care. They are outward with it. So when you hear that, say, okay, these are the people who are supposed to be informing us. When you listen to what they tell you, they're not informing you of news. They're giving you their analysis of what they saw or what they hear or what they want you to take away from it. They leave out the little things like I'm sure you didn't know and I didn't know, about how China had the lock on, the production of most of our pharmaceuticals. I didn't know that.
I did not know that.
Now when that comes out, people are like, whoa, what the hell? That's not good. But where's all the journalists that should have been digging this up? Well, because China has invested so much money in Washington and with lobbyists and like that they dare not say anything negative about them. So even if they did know about it, they're not going to say anything because they know the reaction of most Americans would be, well, geez, what if something happens like, I don't know, coronavirus, COVID-19, and suddenly China's like, don't know if we can really provide the medicine you want.
Yeah.
At that point, people say, well, geez, Trump has been saying for 25 years that China's our biggest enemy, and we've all been laughing about it like he's crazy. And it's like suddenly he seems like he may have been smarter than everyone around, and that's the last thing they want.
And who took a lot of money from the Chinese when he was vice president?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right, China Joe.
That's right. Joe. And I don't see any interest from the media in getting to the bottom of that story. None. They don't care about it at all.
No. Now the two speakers I thought were, they were all very effective, but the two that really for me slayed the DNC and the Democrats was Ann Dorn, the wife of David Dorn, the 70-year-old retired police officer, who was shot and killed, trying to protect a friend's pawn shop, in St. Louis. She was devastating to their narrative. And the thing is you can't really attack her. She's a widower, just telling the story of what happened. So they're like, oh man, that sounds so bad on the face of it. And she was so articulate and so composed that it was just a devastating narrative for them. So they had to pivot away from that. And the other one for me, which was a more personal one, was the mother and father of the girl that was captured by ISIS and was repeatedly tortured and raped by Akbar al-Baghdadi and just held prisoner for 18 months. And during the Obama administration, and that for me, it was devastating just to hear the pain and loss that they experienced. But what was so telling or striking for me was they voiced exactly what I always said during the Obama administration, because I was scheduled to go to Afghanistan on a tour of duty. And when we were preparing to go to Afghanistan, you got to go through all these different trainings. You got to go through SEER school, survival school. You have to go through a lot of tactical combat type of training and evasive driving techniques, all this stuff, because you're going to a war zone, right? And the one thing we always agreed on, everybody that was going over, is like, if we get captured, we're done. Because even if we survive, our government under Obama probably was not going to do a hell of a lot to get us out. And that was just a foregone conclusion. And of course, that's exactly what happened with this girl. And then when Trump comes out and he's gotten 50 people released since he's been president, you never hear a word about it.
No, you don't.
And they're constantly working to get these people released. You just say that's the night and day difference. So, for everybody that's like, oh, you know what I mean? Well, your chances and all that stuff, and she shouldn't have been over there. Hey, yeah, it wouldn't have been a career choice I would advise my daughter to do, no doubt. But I tell you what, once your daughter or you or anybody in your family is captured, you want that federal government doing everything possible to find you and get you released. I don't get the feeling that was the case. It was, you're typically bureaucratic. We're doing everything we can. We're doing everything, and we'll call you when we hear something, and the call never comes.
Well, and I'm going to point out that if you remember the very, very, very sad case of Otto Warmbier from the University of Virginia, the student that was taken prisoner in North Korea and put in prison based on these ridiculous charges. Who got him back? And
right.
you don't hear a whole lot about that. And Obama actually had the same opportunity that President Trump had to get Otto back, and he didn't do that. And you don't hear them talk about that at all. In fact, I heard from a lot of Democrats at the time, very, 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 very sick, said that Otto actually got what he deserved. What was he doing over there? And he was a privileged white kid, and Frank, you really look at some of the things that some of these Democrats have done, and it's almost evil, the way that they look at the world and look at the country. Just unbelievable to me.
They truly don't care. They don't care about average people. And if you're not part of their club and their clique, you don't matter. No matter how much they say they're for the little guy, trust me, they're the party of the oligarchs. They're the party of the rich and powerful elite. I mean, just look at who's the Speaker of the House, and talk about an elitist extreme bubble she lives in. But you're right. When you think of Otto Warmbier and all of those things, it tells you Trump is able to get these guys out, and these other guys couldn't, because either they didn't try, or the governments that they were talking to looked at them and said, they're so weak, they're such paper tigers, what are they going to do? See, and that's the thing. Trump is a strong guy. He's a strong man, and there's a reason why the UAE and the Middle Eastern countries are listening to him, because I spent a lot of time over there, especially in the UAE. They like strength. They like strong leaders. They like Trump because he's a strong leader. They did not care for Obama because they did not think that he was strong. Plus, they felt like he was more aligned with Iran, their enemy, which is 90 miles from their shore, than with them. So they like a strong leader. When he's talking to the North Korean, Kim Jong-un, he got him to the table because Un looked like, I'm crazy, but I think that guy's even more crazy. And when he says he might bomb us, he just might. Whereas Obama says, don't do that. And they're like, yeah, whatever. All right, Junior, thanks. That's the difference. So it's like he doesn't have respect around the world. Trust me. Those countries respect the United States and respect Trump.
They do.
Because unlike America, where we're raising a nation of wimps and whiners, the rest of the world actually likes strong leaders, and they respect strong leaders. And we are feminizing our country to the point that if you got a whining grievance, everything has to stop to make you feel better. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not a recipe for success in the long run.
No. And speaking of which, I think a lot of Americans forget that how respected Trump is overseas. And it's not just in the Middle East, and it's not just in Asia. But I was in Poland a couple of years ago, Frank, and the Polish loved President Trump. They love him over there.
Yeah, right. And this is, so when they start, all they have to do is go over to some foreign countries. Of course, you're going to meet some people that don't like him, but we're talking about the leadership of the countries. They may not like him, but they're intimidated enough by him to realize we got to play ball. You know what I mean? And we haven't had that in decades. No. It wasn't just Obama. This has been decades.
Yeah, that's true.
We haven't had that. I would say the last strong leader we had where made the other countries set up and like, oh, crap, we better pay attention, was Reagan.
Yeah.
And that's only 40 years ago? So almost 40 years, we haven't had anybody that really wants to set up, take notes. I was reading a book just earlier before you called, and about our foreign policy with China and how George H.W. Bush should have been completely aware of what China was doing, because not only was he ambassador to China before he was the vice president, but he was this director of the CIA. So he knew all about what China was doing. But yet, when he becomes president and he's campaigning, in his inaugural speech, he talks about how we want to have open borders and open country and an open world, and we have to all be inclusive and all this stuff. I mean, he's got this the old New World Order where we're basically being globalists, and we've been doing that since 1989. Okay, so from 1989 to now, till 2016, we've had leaders that are basically China saying, well, we can roll these guys. And our guys are saying, oh, yeah, you can roll us. And Trump walks in like, you're not rolling us. You're not rolling me. And they're like, oh, crap. You know?
That's right. Oh, man, I tell you what, Frank, and something that the Democrats are doing right now. And again, this goes back to statement analysis, and you can learn these techniques from Frank's podcast, Lies People Tell. You know, once you see what Frank talks about and it opens your eyes and you ask yourself, why is somebody saying something or why are they doing something? For example, the latest thing is this. And I want you to, for the listeners out there, I want you to really think about this. I think that the Democrats are getting very scared about November. They see that Trump is going to win. And the more that I see him, the more I'm convinced that he's going to win, and he's going to win by a landslide. But you've got, Hillary Clinton already saying that Biden should not concede at all. Yeah. Never concede. And that's exactly what she did after 2016. But what they're doing is they are saying things like, President Trump should not go here. He should not go there. He should not do these rallies that he does. They didn't want him to go to Kenosha because, ironically, what they said was it will be bad for him. That was a very bad move for the president to do. This is not going to look good for him. Now, you got to ask yourself, if you were a strategist for the Democratic National Committee and you truly believed that going to Kenosha would look bad for the president, wouldn't you want him to go? Frank, wouldn't you want him to go there? Because if it's going to hurt him, why in God's name would I want him not to go? I would want him, not only would I want him to go there, but I'd want him to go to every place that makes him look bad. Which says to me, they actually think it's going to make him look good. So with the Democrats, what you're learning is you actually have to, whatever they're saying, the opposite is more likely to be true.
Well, you remember the old Seinfeld show? You had George Costanza, and he had the George Costanza rule, where he had the episode where he did everything completely opposite of what he would normally do. He would, any situation, whether it was a work situation, a relationship situation, what he would normally do, he would do 180 degrees from. And he was a resounding success at work. He got promoted. He got a beautiful girlfriend. Everything that he would never do, he did. And he was successful. That's what you got to apply with the media. Anytime they say something, you use the Costanza rule and say, well, it's 180 degrees from that. If they're saying it's bad for him to go to Kenosha, they mean it's good for him to go to Kenosha. They just don't want him to,
That's right.
But, when you say that there's fear, they really do have a lot of fear because two things. Nancy Pelosi has said that, Biden should not debate because, under the auspices of Trump is so unpresidential, you wouldn't even want to be on stage with him. And that's an excuse they're going to use. Biden will never debate. Okay. That's never going to happen. He will not debate. And that will hurt him, but they think, they're willing to take a chance. But the other thing is the comedian Jim Gaffigan?
Yeah.
Right. Did you hear about the Twitter rant that he went on the last night of the RNC?
No, I did not hear that.
Well, I mean, he's, known as a clean Catholic, comedian. He doesn't curse in his comedy. He's a very staunch Catholic. He works clean, you know what I mean? And he's got a huge following. But remember, he doesn't do politics. He does not do politics. So you have a comedian, the one comedian out there that's not cursing, that's not using politics and bashing Trump, that's an evangelical or a Catholic at least. And, so who do you think is his fan base? Guys like Trump supporters, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you would think, yeah.
Right. So he goes in this, profanity-laden rant of about 16 tweets
talking about Trump and how Trump supporters are stupid to follow him, and just, he's dropping the F-bomb and just this. I mean, it was viral. It was viral. And it really was like he had lost his mind. And he's like, and he comes back, he's trying to cover and say, well, I've just been holding it inside for so long that I couldn't take it any longer, and his wife is trying to shut him up because, she realizes you're pissing away millions of dollars right here, pal. You know what I mean?
This is your job you're about to lose.
Yeah, but so he goes on this long Twitter rant and everything, and of course the usual suspects are, oh, he's great, but then he's getting tons of blowback from people that actually are his fan base, right? But here's the significant thing. When did he do that? He did that the final night of the RNC. Because he saw, this is my opinion, but I think there's some validity to this. I think he saw the RNC and he realized how good it looked, and it scared the hell out of him that Trump has a good shot of pulling this off. And that's why he lost his mind. You know how when someone gets extremely desperate and they start freaking out? That's what he did. He had a freak out mode. He melted down, and no one was there to take away the Twitter machine. And he really he alienated, most of his fan base, to include me. I'm done with him because it's sort of like, I'm not going to spend money on anybody, whether it's watching a TV special or listening to anything he does. I'm not going to spend any money on somebody that hates me. When you profess, I hate you in everything you believe in, and I think you're stupid, then you just made my economic choices far simpler. I don't have to spend any money. And I'm not the only one. So that's how effective the RNC's convention was. Yeah. That you took a guy that made $30 million last year and said, something, I guess, and maybe he thought, well, I got enough screw you money, I don't need it. But that's not how people think. I think he literally lost his mind because he saw the handwriting on the wall, and he's like, we have a dementia patient, an Alzheimer's patient as our candidate, and then we got Trump, who is pretty much doing everything right, even though I'm going to claim he's doing everything wrong. It's like,
Yeah, you know what, Frank? And I think that this whole idea, now I know what's going on in professional sports today is they feel that not only do you have to acknowledge all these political views, but you have to openly embrace the political views. And I saw an interview with Wayne Newton. Do you remember Wayne Newton, the old Las Vegas performer? He's been on the Las Vegas circuit for a long, long time, right? And he was being interviewed, and the interviewer said, hey, you've been around for a long, long time, and you seem to stay above the fray and everything. And what's that all about? And Wayne Newton, and it made me think about what's going on today. His response was this. He said, my father, because he comes from an entertainment family, okay? And in the entertainment, his father said to him when he first started out, hey, Wayne, you're a performer. Perform. People live out there in the world. Our audience lives out there in the world. It's a hard life. And they come to see you to escape from that life. You're an entertainer. You're not any more than that. You're not a politician. You're not a historian. You're not a businessman. You're not any of those things. You're an entertainer, and that's why people come to see you. So entertain. And he said that was how he lived the rest of his life in the entertainment business. Was, he says, you're not going to know my politics. You're not going to know any of my beliefs. I have beliefs just like everybody else, but I'm not going to put it out on the stage because that's not why people come to see me. And so my message to the NFL, the NHL, the NBA certainly, and all these other sports arenas, I'm done with you. I will not watch. I will not watch any professional sports that professes the political views that they're ramming down your throat right now because it is so ignorant. For example, Black Lives Matter. We know this is a Marxist, violent organization. Now, how do we know that? Because A, I have 2 eyeballs and a brain, and I can see what's going on in America today. And B, I can also read their very own website where they talk about what they're doing. And I will not watch a professional football game where the virtues of these people that are burning down our cities in this great country, while they're doing that, there's no way that I'm going to watch that. And they have, and I think, but here's my prediction, Frank, that all of these organizations, the NBA, NHL, and the NFL, are going to find that there is a lot of people that are not going to tune in. They will not get the money. So I know they did this because they thought it was a good business move. It was a horrible business move. And I'm not even a businessman, and I know that was a bad business move.
No, you're exactly right. And you're not alone. I'm not alone. People will say, and my wife said, well, he made $30 million. Absolutely. And if he makes $15 million, that's still a lot of money, but it's not as much as $30 million. And, and if you think a 16 tweet rant is worth $15 million, then you really do have screw you money because, it ain't worth it to me. And plus, why? I mean, because, you may have a short-term bounce, but trust me, this is something that you don't live down. Jane Fonda never lived down Vietnam. And her career was never like that after that. I mean, she was a rock star. She could do no wrong. But after Vietnam, that star waned quite a little bit. And there's a lot of people. And as I mentioned to my wife, he's decided to go the career track of the Dixie Chicks, who, when I said that, my daughter said, who? I said, precisely. Because when the Dixie Chicks did their meltdown, they were probably the biggest country music band at the time. They had hit after hit. They only had 3 albums, and I think they had probably 10 hits out of the 3, which is unheard of. I mean, that probably even more than that. They were untouchable, and they went from hero to zero very quickly. People remember these things. Average Americans really remember these things, and everybody needs to remember. He may impress Antifa types and Black Lives Matter types, but they don't buy tickets to his show.
No, they don't. They don't.
Yeah, so,
and I'm not going to be buying tickets to their shows. So, but I know you got to run, Frank. And so thanks again. And listen, really encourage our listeners to check out Frank's new podcast, and that's Lies People Tell. You check it out on any of the services that are out there. And so, Frank, anything you want to say about your podcast before we go?
No. I just appreciate you putting it out there. I think give it a listen, and I think it's interesting. I always call it the podcast where self-help meets true crime, because I use criminal statements that I've gathered over the years, some of them well-known, some not, to explain how people use deception. And then I try to juxtapose that of, this is the same thing you may run across in a everyday situation with your kid or a coworker, and if you're hiring someone. So I think it's kind of interesting. It's a little different, and it gives people a idea or a little look behind the curtains of how we do investigations and how we look at what people say to us during an investigation.
And you forgot to mention that the most important use of detecting lies is when you're talking to your liberal friends and family. That's the most important application.
Yeah, exactly. just remember, you're starting off with a distinct advantage because you actually understand what truth is. So,
That's right. All right. So with that, thank you again, Frank, for joining us here today. And this is the Mark Vine Show. Check us out on Facebook. Share this podcast with all of your friends. Help them become smarter people. And I look forward to talking with you soon. Take care.